Welcome to Creative Questions, the podcast where we attempt to review various creative projects we ourselves are part of and/or people's unique creations and attempt to celebrate the creative inspiration in all of us. I am Desiree Silver and your host and owner of New Nerd Novelties and hashtag Own Your Weird Lifestyle brand.
And I'm your co-host, Liam Hewlett, back again.
So today we'll be talking about different creative mediums after our usual catch-up of the week. Thanks for joining me, Liam. How are you doing today?
Well, week's been up and down. I had to get some blood work done, and I hate having to go out of the house to do it, but it was way faster than last time, so at least there was that. While I was out there, I stopped by the local comic book shop, which I haven't done in several months, and picked up some supplies for projects I've got on the go. So yeah, I've been okay.
How was the blood work? Was it a long lineup?
No, I wasn't any lineup at all. It actually filled its name of being a walk-in for once. Beats the last time I got there when it opened and was there for 3 hours. So I was anticipating that, brought my Switch and everything, but didn't need to do it.
Good day, good day. Anybody who has medical problems knows that's a good day.
Yeah.
So
yeah, what about yourself?
I'm doing okay myself, I guess. Fighting a little bit of a cold, so if I sound a little bit weird, that could be why. Either that or I'm not used to talking this much, which is also a possibility. And this past week's been kind of crazy. I've been teaching myself all kinds of different programs to start up this website. I learned Descript to fix this podcast last week and Zoom, and then I downloaded a whole bunch of photo editing software and video editing software, and I'm in the middle of amending all of my pictures for all my different items. If you know me, you know that my stock consists of 100 different items, and my friend who's helping me make my website wants me to write 300 words for each and every single one in different type. So I calculated that with my husband, who likes to write. That's about more than a novella and less than a novel. It's going to take a bit.
Yeah, repetition, right?
Doesn't want me to copy and paste. So I don't know.
So hobby-wise, is that mostly what you've been doing then? Or
yeah, that's mostly what I've been doing. I half mocked out a little tiny Sam that I said I was working on. I'll send you the picture when I get it soon. But yeah, he's only half done.
Right.
I didn't get to finish him yet because, well, technology is taking up all my time right now.
Anytime you're starting anything up, it's always, especially when you're not familiar with the programs, once you get some familiarity with it, it definitely starts clicking a lot faster. When I first started doing my website, it was a whole day just trying to create a page, and now it's so easy.
That's what everybody keeps telling me, and I really hope that's true because I don't want to be doing it this hard forever.
Yeah, unless you're just constantly learning new programs, you can't have that new program experience every single day. It just doesn't happen, right? Like
unless I learn a new one every day, which is starting to feel like it.
Yeah. So unless you just continuously add new and new programs, you'll get it. So hobby-wise, I've actually done a decent amount this week, now that I'm getting on the tail end of my Final Fantasy 14 train. So I did assemble some miniatures. I could have done a little bit more in that regard, but I was lacking in supplies. I actually am pretty happy with how some of these turned out. I've had a concept for a type of character that I haven't really known whether or not I'd be able to fulfill its potential in a miniature form properly. I knew I could at least get a good enough representation, but turned out I had more appropriate parts than I had guessed when I started putting it together, and it turned out really well. Like, what the basic concept of it is, it's a fantasy race that I've created for my setting that are people that have animal heads. Basically, it's just that simple. Like, they have different kinds of animal heads. There's no one specific type or tribe. It just depends on the individual. So they could have a panther head, but they have a human body, right? And they have a very Goliath style humanoid body, but all of them uniquely have animal heads. And so I started making one, but finding human-sized or humanoid-sized animal heads for miniatures is actually kind of difficult, because most animals are made in the heroic scale to be large. And so if you just cut a wolf's head off and try to put it on a human body, it doesn't look right. But I got lucky and I found some foxes that were just basically meant to be like critter clutter, and they were perfectly sized. So I've got like this beefy guy that's got like, yeah, he looks great. He's got like a cloak flapping in the wind, a spear that he's thrusting out, a dagger in one hand, and just like bare arms, bulging biceps, and a fox head.
And a fox head.
And a fox head, yeah.
But he's a
Although,
regular size model?
yeah, they're humanoid-sized creatures. My whole concept for them was that they wouldn't have like a spoken language. They're a slave race of my evil empire, and they're somewhat of like the elite shock troops. That their whole thing is that as they get damaged, they start turning to stone. Both like the older they get, but also the more physically damaged they become slower, but also more hard. Like they literally become living statues, and that's how they die. From a concept originally of back in old fantasy, Warhammer Fantasy, Chaos Dwarves were dwarves that had the ability to use magic, which most dwarves didn't. Most dwarves didn't believe in magic, so they couldn't use it. But Chaos Dwarves struck a deal with a dark god to allow them to cast spells, but in order to do that, they slowly turned themselves to stone. And I love that concept of just like, that's your inevitable end. It's like, you know how you're going to go. It's always going to be turning into a statue. And so I wanted to incorporate that in my campaign in some way. So I did put together one of those miniatures, and he's not painted yet, and he still has a little bit of work to do, filling in some gaps and stuff like that. But really happy, at least so far, with how he's turned out. I'll at least have one decent Morok for the campaign, and I'll make more later. The picture I got here, I'll show you. It's dark, but you might be able to see it. I didn't drag out all my lights to take a picture of it.
He's the one up top. Okay. I can kind of see him, but he's pretty gray. I sent you a
Yeah.
picture of Sam too. My pattern for Sam. He looks kind of funny though. Because he's not done yet. He's gonna be stuffed. And then he's got burlap for his face. That's kind of a fake burlap fabric. But I
Right.
got also distracted because I really want to make his little lollipop with the clear resin because it looks cuter that way. So
Yeah.
but
And
if I
you've
get
done that
distracted,
before. You've done a lot of resin stuff.
I have, but it's gotten to the point where if it's too hot over here on the West Coast, it's too sticky and humid, and then I can't do resin. So we're just getting out of that season when I can finally start pouring again. So I'm kind of like thinking what I can do to make jewelry that looks like Sam's sucker because I really like it myself too. So
Right.
distracted.
Yeah, the so like besides assembling the miniatures, because I also made like a Yeti. That's actually, I'm gonna need to paint that by Sunday. The other miniatures, that's fine. They don't need to be painted right away. They're not an immediate like issue for the party. The Yeti is most likely going to be a combat encounter this Sunday, so he's got to get painted. But I was also at the same time basically making a board game for D&D on Sunday, because what the party is doing currently, and this is something I've found as a DM that I have to do a lot, is as a dungeon master, you basically have to be a jack of all trades for everything, right? I write, I paint, I make terrain, but I also have to make up rules, not just for NPCs and for monsters that I create. I also have to make systems on the fly of like people like working within the boundaries of D&D. Somebody wants to do something off the wall, I got to think of some way to quantify that if I think that it's something they could possibly do. And so the guys are currently putting in their efforts into trying to get an entire Gold's Rush worth of people to not die in the winter. That is going to be coming rapidly and harshly, and the people are very poorly prepared for it. So taking that concept of like, how could these guys affect change in a significant way, I quantified it basically into a sort of Risk or Pandemic style board game by robbing pieces from several board games that I have, and laying out the regional map that I made, the regional map in a super awesome program I've been using for D&D called Incarnate that has allowed me to make both like regional as well as like city maps and other stuff. That it's got like an awesome like customizable just parchment or physical map style to it. And there's so many different ways I can make a map in that, and it's another medium that's just like, it's a whole new tool set to learn. It's like learning Photoshop but just for making maps. I've loved it though, and it's been a great benefit to my campaign. So I put the picture there in Discord for you to see. That's going to be the game map that they're going to be using.
For this new area you were saying. Yeah, the new
Yeah,
areas. Yeah.
it's the region that they're trying to save from dying in the winter to wild animals, bandits, and just a lack of food and preparation. So I'm hopeful for the best, but the odds are stacked against them. They'll
Yeah.
probably save some people. They're definitely not going to save them all.
Yeah, what are they gonna do? Like you can't,
Yeah,
randomly make food.
they've got about 21 days to try to get as many possible like people into shelter and supplied with like food and shelter as they can. And at that point, winter's going to hit in a big way, and anybody that's not properly sheltered or like fed is going to be pretty SOL. So that's what I've been doing this last week. I made that board game. I play tested it a whole bunch by just like laying out a board, moving cubes, and like adjusting the rules that I had made just pulled out of my ass to a point where it's at least, okay, this feels like they have a lot of choice here, and it feels like it's a scenario that they could possibly win. But every step and every like day and every turn that they take is a lot of choices, and that's what I want. I wanted to like give them a real brain cruncher of like how they can try to manage the resources that they have available to them, manage the manpower that they have, trying to save as many people and gather as many resources as possible. And I love doing that sort of stuff, of giving my players like difficult, meaningful choices. That's kind of what I aim for in everything that I do for the campaign. And I think I've done pretty well on this. I'm pretty proud of it. So hopefully the guys will enjoy it when they come into play on Sunday.
I hope they appreciate how much work goes into this.
Yeah, I think they do. It's easier to see with the miniatures, because I'll bring out like a giant miniature that's taken me like 40 or 50 hours plus to paint. It's pretty obvious how much effort goes into that. And I generally make them pretty big nasties so that they will need to respect it, or have a difficult fight in order to challenge it. And the guys do seem to appreciate it. I do it for myself as well, right? I love to have the miniatures painted, and if I don't have a reason to do it, I won't even assemble it if I don't have a reason to use it. So yeah, it's cool to make these maps and like get better at doing it. And yeah, better at making these systems up on the fly. So this could be a pretty good segue into what we're actually going to be talking about, our main topic for this week, which is going to be different mediums. An example being this map making that I never thought would be a thing I was going to do. I've actually really gotten into map making quite a bit, not just in the program that I was talking about Incarnate, but also like my first map making endeavors. Like I tried drawing it out. I'm awful at drawing, especially anything that doesn't resemble abstract circles and shapes. So my early maps were just for me. I was not going to share it with the guys in any way, but they were for my reference, so I could at least have a picture in my mind of the area that they were crawling around. But the guys have really, they've given me the input that like when they have a visual to give them a little bit of reference, they get way more involved in it. They get way more invested. And so I made the effort to make a map that they could actually see. And since I couldn't draw worth a damn, but I could make terrain, the first thing I did was literally make a 3D map. I just modeled it out of cardboard and polystyrene and the stuff I usually make terrain out of. I made a whole bunch of little miniatures for points of interest, like for towns and caves and watchtowers and stuff like that. I just made it all. And that was way more time and effort than it was really worth. But that map did last for quite some months in the campaign.
It was
But
the one
once I,
with the magnets, right? The one with the
yeah,
magnets.
I made it so that it had magnets within the board so I could have hidden points of interest. And then when they encountered that point of interest, I could bring out the miniature and just attach it to the board. So I still have that board, but it was definitely limited in scope for the fact that anytime they would have gone out of that region, because that was like the start of the campaign. So when they started to expand their scope, I'm like, I don't want to have to make a map for my entire world. It's just, it would be too much, right? There's just too much for them to go and see and do, and there would be too many maps for me to make. I'm not going to make a map of a city because I don't think I would be able to do it justice, right? I would want the city to feel epic, but I don't think I'd be able to really do epic if I just wanted to model it within a reasonable amount of time. I could do it if I wanted to make it like a showcase set piece, but not as like a reference for a map. So I was really happy when I did find that map making program and like how affordable it was. It's actually quite cheap for like an entire year's worth of subscriptions, and it's got great tools. It really is just like Photoshop with specialized tools just for maps.
And they look like Tolkien from the ones you've shown me and the ones on your website. And we'll definitely
Yeah.
put links to those in the description as well.
Yeah, those are the ones that I favor because there's definitely a lot of like you could go more realistic, or you can even go like they allow you to make battle maps too, right? So if you were playing D&D online with your friends, you could make the battle maps in that program as well. And I don't do that. I like to have my maps on my fantasy gaming terrain that I have just like a billion of, right? I've got so much of it. I don't want to be using a square grid because I think it breaks up the terrain. It breaks up my immersion of the gameplay. So that's like one of the newest mediums that I've gotten into as a side effect of the other stuff that I do. What about you? What's something that you've come across that you never actually expected to do, but you started it because it facilitated something else that you were doing?
Basically
You
everything
have
I've
one of
done
those?
in this last week, anything technology wise. Growing up in the 90s, I'm going to blame you for this. My brother called me digital herpes because every time I touched a computer, it would freeze, even if I was doing something as simple as checking out my email. So I didn't grow up in the computer room, and we had a computer that had half a gig. So that's what I had for its storage capacity. That just tells you my background. Like, you can't run anything off half a gig, period.
I mean, at the time, it wasn't terrible. We had dial up for a long time, though.
Yeah, and dial up, and you'd sit there and you'd read a book while loading Doom,
Mhm.
and you had the computer, and I wasn't interested in it at all. I used it as a typewriter. I used Microsoft Publisher to make brochures for school, and I never even learned Word. And
Yeah. Use it to download music, though.
I downloaded music, I downloaded videos. I did. I made mom a bunch of mixed CDs that she still loves of Halloween music, but that was it. I was not tech savvy in any way, shape, or form. I used MSN. Woo, chatting.
Yeah, that's definitely aging us right there.
Right there, yeah. Live journal. Anyway, so growing up and then having phones that could go on the internet is when I finally started getting into technology. And the people I was living with and or dating at the time had an obsession with the newest gaming console. So that was more of my introduction into technology. And now, like, being able to, I just opened my TikTok actually account and actually went to post something this week. I posted like 3 different things because it was so easy turning a video into like adding all these elements and cutting and splicing and turning a picture into a video. 3 clicks. I didn't
Yep.
even look through the tutorials. I was so impressed with it.
It's so easy. Video
So easy.
editing it's gotten so much easier to get into than it was even like 5 years ago. But like, let alone at this point, 20 years ago.
Yeah, when I learned Photoshop, it was 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So the new Photoshop, I kind of had to relearn everything, and I've noticed that like I took a class actually in post-secondary education on how to do like one of
Yeah,
the
I was gonna say that you took like
yeah, I took a class of one of the original
photo
photos.
editing as a because you were definitely at one point pursuing that
Yeah,
as like a major thing was.
and that was like when 1 gig of memory card was expensive. So that was a while ago too. But so those elements of Photoshop actually, I can see them now on all of these cool programs on my phone. And they're just included in things like Instagram, TikTok. I have a couple of video and photo editing Snapseed app, and it will do what Photoshop will do. Because right now I'm like, ah, crap. Teal is telling me I have to take all the photos that you and I took with our special cameras, and as bunches, she wants them all snipped into individuals and then blur out the other ones. So I'm sitting
Right.
there for hours on my phone, just snipping and blurring all in my phone. So instead
Yeah.
of just sitting
It's
here and doing
so
nothing,
easy to do that. Yeah.
so easy. And I'm so happy with it because I really was ticked on having to do it. I know it needs to be done, but I don't want to sit here on the computer all day. I just don't.
Yeah.
I have an aversion
Well,
to
and like that
it.
um because I used to do stuff like in order to capture a screenshot, you could just like and you can still do this. You could just
Yeah,
print screen and then paste it into Paint. And like Paint was a program that didn't change for like 15 years. And it's gotten to the point now where it's
Paint's
like,
like Photoshop.
yeah,
Yeah.
it basically is, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, it was such a basic program. And now it's just got all these added additional features. So that would be what like one of the things that you kind of have fallen into is this
Yeah,
like
the technology one, I never,
the
ever,
image
never,
editing,
ever.
right?
Yeah, video
And video editing and like
and
sound editing and stuff
sound
like that.
editing. No,
Yeah.
never, never, ever. I remember they did have a project in high school, but it was like our computers were so dumb, it was really difficult to do. We were trying to do like a newscast, and I basically opted into, I'll do this part. You guys figure out how to cut and edit it because there's no way I'm able to do that.
Right.
You can just record me, and here's my video, and here's the sound. You figure it out.
Well, then what would you say would be how, if you can think of, what would be the most difficult medium that you've ever like tried to learn and like either you bounced off of or you did manage to eventually get into? Like, what do you think over all of the ones that we've been through? And like when we talk about mediums, we're talking about like things that you use to create a creative project, we should say, right? Because
Yeah.
we haven't really addressed that. Like mediums, it's not the spiritual kind. It is just
Spiritual.
the tools that you use to make something, right? So that could be a potter's clay, right, along with a kiln, or it could be drawing or painting or music or anything like that. It's just like that's what a medium is, and we bounce around through a whole bunch of different ones. We have our favorites, but like we definitely dip our toes in a ton of them.
I think it's
So,
easier now because they're so easier accessible, especially with online how-tos. The
mhm,
ones that I would find, I've got two that were like the hardest. So the one that I loved since I was young was doing clay in high school. I love slab techniques, which is all by hand and rolling by hand, and pinch and curl and coil techniques. So all the stuff
it,
you basically learn in elementary school.
right, you were never a big wheel, like not a
No,
potter's
the
wheel, right?
problem was the wheel. Thank God our school couldn't afford one because by the time I got to the wheel in college, I hated it.
Right.
You would spend hours and hours and hours and get nothing but slip, which is literally just mud. You couldn't even make clay out of that anymore. It was just dirt. And I didn't have 6 or 7 or 8 hours a day for days and days and days to just figure out how to make this thing work. I hated it. Still hate it. So I love the hand techniques, hate the wheel techniques for pottery. And it takes a lot of strength and a lot of patience because I don't want to work for 8 hours to wind up with nothing but mud. That is not what I consider an okay input export ratio.
Yeah.
So for for me, that one I was really surprised and how difficult because I loved clay and did it for like 4 years in high school. And then the other one that looked really, really hard is vinyl. So vinyl's faux leather. And if you know anything about leather, leather is tough. Leather takes rather specific techniques. And putting it through a regular sewing machine is not exactly a good idea for leather. And I thought faux leather might be the same. It's not. Faux leather is finicky. You can do it on a regular machine, depending on what kind of faux leather you have. It just needs a couple of extra techniques and a heck of a lot of patience. But I was scared to even touch that. I joined a bunch of communities on Facebook who make their own purses and wallets and bags. And I always thought that was kind of like, way out of my reach kind of level. And no, already with the sewing techniques I already know, it's just fine. You just need to be patient with it because you can't backstitch, you can't rip out stitches. And
Yeah,
you have
that
to,
sounds a lot like me. And there's a few things like that I've had in the miniature side of things where I'm like, that seems way above my pay grade, right?
yeah,
I'm like, I don't think I could ever really get to that point. Then you start doing it a bit and you're like, oh, it's not that bad, right? That was
just,
airbrushing for me,
it's
right?
just
Where
not
I'm
as
like,
forgiving, right? In some ways.
it's just another learned skill, right?
Yeah.
And the skills that you have learned in your modeling like time will help you. And like, yeah, if you picked it up just and you picked up modeling at the same time, then yeah, it would be another hurdle to learning the whole thing as a whole. But adding it to your already existing skills, it's just like, yeah, okay, I fucked up with this technique, but I can make it work with my other techniques to cover up my mistakes or fix it. So for me, that was very much true of what they like modeling putty, or what they call green stuff. It's a
Mm.
two-part like plasticine that you mix together. Generally, it's one part green, one part blue. When you mix them together, they start to harden. So it's a sculptor's putty, right? And you use that to add additional features to miniatures. And you can basically sculpt an entire miniature from scratch. That's what they use to make the original molds of miniatures that they sell in sprues, right? They'll have a sculptor that makes the original miniature, they break it up into pieces so that they can put it into a box and have people assemble it and then paint it. But somebody originally used that sculptor's putty to make the original miniature. So on the creator's end, you can use that to sculpt potentially anything that you want to add to a miniature, depending on how skilled you are and how experienced you are with it. And when you start off, it's going to look like garbage. It's going to look worse than Play-Doh that you've added to a beautiful miniature. But eventually you just sort of incorporate it. And especially when you start like really getting into it, it can add a great deal to your miniatures. One of my favorite aspects of using that particular medium is adding it to my miniatures for flames and fire, because it's a very distinct effect with very little effort on my part, that it adds a whole layer that people can instantly recognize. It's a lot of flash without having to actually be that difficult to do once you learn how to sculpt the flames and how to paint it so it looks good. uh yeah, whole lot of bang for your buck.
Can you like use a Dremel and scrape it later too, after it's dry? Because I know you've got a very short dry time, right?
For the sculpting putty, it actually takes 24 hours.
No, that's not too bad.
So like, yeah, it starts to harden, but it's moldable basically for the entire time you want. When you're dealing with miniature paints, that stuff dries fast, like not within a minute or two, like within seconds. It's off your brush, it's on the miniature. It's gonna, like, depending how thick you put it on there, it's gonna be dry real quick. Which means that when you fuck up, it's on there, but it's also really easy to go back and cover something up because you don't have to wait like an hour for anything to dry. And that's almost all miniature paints. They dry so fast, they can be difficult to mix because of how fast they dry.
And you're also only using a small amount because they're small miniatures, which also would probably
Yeah,
contribute to the dry time.
it does. Yeah.
Because everything I do, no matter what, it takes forever to dry, and I get it all over myself. So obviously, I'm not using the right kind of paints.
Yeah, they are specialized paints, obviously.
I'm robbing your paints when I'm doing anything when I'm over there now.
They're also fairly expensive. So I've got the supplies of like less expensive, more copious amounts of paints. And our mother is also a painter. She has her own supply that I often rob from. Um,
Well, it's not robbing if we're all in the same house.
right. Uh, for for me, because that was definitely one of the more difficult ones that I thought would be difficult, but it turned out to like be okay. There have been some that I have definitely just like butted my head against again and again, and never gotten anything done with it. And that's drawing. I love people that can like pencil sketch or do digital art drawing. Any of that, I am so fucking bad at that. And I just don't have the desire to put the effort in to get good at it. It's a completely separate skill set from what I have developed with miniatures and painting and terrain and all this sort of stuff. Like the best I've gotten is I freehand quite a bit of stuff on like my banners and miniatures and stuff like that. I can do stuff as long as I have like an idea of what I need to like put. It's like if I have an image of something, I can copy that onto a miniature or onto a banner, but I cannot draw like just a freehand skull or a rose or anything like that. I need an image reference.
I think we're the exact same that way because I've always wanted to do that too. I'm good at copying. I can 100% copy. You've seen my stuff. I can
Yeah,
blow
you
it
can
up.
copy better than I can.
I can copy. I can make things blown up or blown down. I have in my stuff still saved somewhere a sketch I made of one of our budgies, and it actually looked realistic. And I'm surprised because I was like 6, because that's something I haven't been able to recreate since. I have a hard time with picture planes and like making the lines of items that are in that picture plane like sit still and work perspective wise, which is
Yeah.
why I'm also really excited about these different programs because it'll do it for me. So if I take a picture of something that's realistic and I want it to be less realistic, I can like use different filters to bring those lines out, and I might actually be able to make that web comic I want to do because with the help of filters, I can finally start to kind of get the idea. Fingers
Right.
crossed. This might be one of those that I think is going to be easy, okay, and it's not. We'll see.
Yeah, I've always had like so much I've wanted to do, and I've like I said, I've bounced off of drawing many times. I've actually put like time, effort, and like dedicated quite a bit of um like uh, personal time and effort into it, and it just never panned out. It was very much like I don't see improvement here. It's like I see, and if I do see improvement, it's very minor, and it's just not good enough, but for my standards.
Not for the amount of work you put into it.
Yeah, right. And as again, as someone that I want there to be a purpose for the things that I do, it was very much like I couldn't create excuses for me to continue drawing. Even when I did actually have purposes for it, like with the making of the maps, it would have been nice if I could have just drawn my own maps, but there was so much like lack of skill I would have to build up to get to what I would find acceptable just for like a crudely drawn map that they could have found in like a goblin layer. That yeah, I just no. So I'm definitely envious of people that can draw. Especially with how many comics and like manga and web comics and stuff that I read. I mad respect for people, even if they have like a modicum amount of drawing skill, but if they can do it consistently, yeah, huge respect for me in that regard, because I can't do shit all in that regard.
Even like especially realism, any kind of realism.
Oh yeah, yeah,
I agree with you. Mad respect.
yeah. Cannot comprehend. I like
I can copy, but
I'm getting
that's
to the
it.
point where I can sculpt my own miniatures and I can make like humanoid proportions, but fuck if I can draw a dude like and not have it look like some sort of monstrosity.
Forget about a hand or a foot.
Oh hell no.
Stupid hands and feet.
Yeah, no way. I can't even draw like an amorphous shape that somebody could be like, that looks like it could be a hand. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I use icons and stamps and stuff like that in my program so I can like make banners and things like that. So I can be like, I've got factions in my setting, right? And it'll be like, okay, this faction, it's got double cross blades for the faction emblem. Am I going to draw 2 blades? No, I am going to find 2 blades online and mush them together and make the emblem and then print that shit off. Yeah, which sucks when you have like a decade plus old printer that just doesn't ever want to print one of the colors at random.
Well, I've got a better printer, and that's another one of my stories from last week. I spent 3 days setting that printer up because it's a wireless printer and it has no USB cords. So there's no way to attach it physically to anything except for the power cord.
So you just have to rely on it communicating with your devices.
And wirelessly and Bluetooth. So I finally gave up after 2 days, and I called on the 3rd day the HR support and it's a lovely lady from the Philippines, and she really helped me go through it, and she did nothing but praise me because most people can't even get it on the wireless network. I got it on the network by the second day. I could not get it to connect.
There is a problem here.
Yeah. She's like, yeah, it uses a wireless connection that's a low number. So I'm gonna change that to a higher number so it'll connect better. And then here are the drivers that you've been looking for 3 days for. Here they are. And finally connected them. She was so
Oh
like,
yeah, I don't think this is all a you problem. This
no,
sounds
exactly.
like yeah.
No, she was so happy that I got on the network. Oh, that's one less thing for me to do because you were like the only person who was able to do that. So I was pretty proud of myself. There was no digital herpes involved with that.
Yeah, I would probably have the same issue.
But now it works and it's connected to all my devices to have the app all the way through the house. So when I
That's
bring
good.
it, as long as it doesn't go cray cray again.
That's the sort of thing. So you could even print things off of your phone then.
Yeah, my phone, my tablet, I just checked it, and my computer. So
It's
once
fancy,
it's on,
fancy.
it's on.
Yeah, I wish I could just print things and not have them like have lines in them.
Well, you will by March
Yeah.
because I'm bringing it with me. And this new thing that HP does is it keeps sending you new ink for the first 6 months free. So I'm like, huh, I'm gonna print off all my patterns that have been sitting here in PDFs.
That's yeah, wow.
Stock up on that shit.
Yeah, I wish I could draw. I do. That's one of the things that it was just like if I could choose to have a medium where I'm just like instantly good at, it would be drawing.
I agree.
Yeah, it would be same for you.
Tila and Dory can both draw. I can't draw. And Tila can even draw digitally and make movies, like animate movies with
well, and that's that's an entirely different skill too.
Yeah,
right?
she's like,
because you can be an
3D
awesome
rendering.
artist but not be able to animate, right? Animating is its own completely unique thing.
But she's like painting the animated group, so it's also the same kind of thing. You have to paint the textures on and stuff. Yeah. I don't want to get into that, but jealous.
So besides the things that we've bounced off of, what would you say would be like the easiest thing that you like fell into? Like you thought it may have been difficult, but it turned out to be like one of the easiest things, or was just like a natural fit?
I think crochet. I mean, I'm real like advanced person, but I tried it when I was a kid. My aunts taught me, but some of my aunts were left-handed too, so I don't know if they didn't teach me correctly. I wasn't doing it right. So whenever I went back, I couldn't figure out what I was doing wrong. Looked up one YouTube video and oh, that's how you do it. And actually the short form for crochet is really easy to figure out. Single crochet is SD, and I figured that out without anybody telling me. It's not rocket science. It's not particularly easy, but it's not rocket science, and I can just do it. I'm not super fast because I'm not super fast at anything at all ever. But it's something I can do without using any of my brain power. So when I'm super sick, I can just sit and crochet.
Yeah.
I was never taught how to cross stitch either. I don't know if I'm all that good, but I can figure it out pretty easily by myself, and I don't even need to YouTube it. So there's that too.
Yeah, if you can do it.
Yeah, it kind of feels natural to me, I guess, because we were taught hand sewing techniques when we were younger too. So it makes sense to me.
Yeah, for me, I'd say it would probably be terrain. Terrain was definitely the thing where
it's like recycled craft. That's why. It's
well, like when you start off as a 9-year-old and you're like, this is a egg carton. You just rip it apart. Now these are rocks, right? It's just like, there you go. And you just go from there. You're like, okay, if I paint the egg carton pieces that I've been using as rocks, they look a little bit more like rocks. It's so easy. You can turn anything into terrain. Like I didn't even do that as a kid. I literally just went into my backyard, took rocks and put them on the battlefield. I'm like, rocks? All right, I got rocks. And yeah, it's so easy because anything can be a piece of terrain. And that's the thing is
better now you're not using any real rocks.
Or if I do, one of the things I did learn, because there's actually a big benefit to using real pieces of nature, especially like bark or tree branches, is they have grains to them. And so they have a whole bunch of detail that you don't have to add to anything, right? But the thing I did learn is that even if it is just a straight up rock, you still need to paint it. That's the most important part of doing terrain, is it has to have like, it has to fit, right? It has to fit with everything else that's on the table. So you can't have your fully painted battle board all with these like beautifully painted miniatures and then just a garden rock, right? Because even though it's a rock, it stands out as being too realistic, right? It's like a sore thumb. You
It's a
actually,
designed rock. You need
yeah,
to,
you
yeah.
paint it to make it look more shitty. That's not a lie. You make it just like, I painted it with a base coat and then I dry brushed it 2 times. It looks worse than when it was just a rock, but now it actually fits with the terrain, right? That's something I learned early on, was that if you take a branch and just put it on the table, it looks less, it fits in less than if you take that branch and swipe it a few times with a brush. It doesn't make any sense, except when you see it, it does.
I think that that's to do with your artistic license. Everything else has your artistic stamp on it. Obviously, the
Yeah,
bush,
it makes it more
know,
unified. Yeah,
yeah.
it doesn't stand out as much when it's, yeah, when it fits in with the rest of the stuff. Yeah, terrain was just such, it was so easy to do, and that's definitely the sort of thing where like I'll make a big board, and it'll be a concept for like a fight, like it'll be like a key fight that the D&D party will be going into, whether they'll be looking for like a young black dragon in a swamp, or they're going to be storming a satyr stronghold, right? Or their very first raid on a bandit camp. I'm going to make that bandit camp, and it's really not going to require that much effort, but it's going to like get a big response from the guys, because it's going to be a fucking table sized bandit camp that they're raiding with their miniatures. And it took me, 2 or 3 days to put together, right? It was not that much effort on my part. A lot of it's drying time. And yeah, it's nice to be able to put out, like, get a good product without having to put out maximum effort all the time.
I think that only happens with a lot of stuff I make now, is if I get into the groove of, I've done this so many times now, it's easy. But
Right.
it's never just, I think that's with you too, but you're fast. I'm not.
Right. Well, I'm also I'm more cavalier with my mistakes, right? So if I make something and I don't like it, I'll throw it out
Yeah,
and just be
you'll
like,
throw it out. I'll make
done
it
with
into a
this.
happy little tree and work on it. You'll chuck it.
Yeah. Like for example, I made some tents, right? I made some tents and I'm like, these look like garbage. I threw them out and just made new tents in a different way. And I only ever use those old tents when I need like shitty tents, right? It's like, okay, this is a goblin camp, or where hobos live or whatever. Then they get the shitty tents. Everyone else, you get the actual tents. So I still kept them around just because like I did make them, but they are awful and I won't use them unless I'm deliberately need shitty tents. Yeah.
I remember once I was pissed off because I made something and it really didn't look like the picture. It didn't look like the pictures, the quote unquote, that we have a story from my mom, that mom taught herself basically how to do everything, including cooking. And when she was young, and my aunt was like 15 when I was born, so she was much younger than my mom, she would experiment on making all these complicated dishes, things like, pie crust from scratch, which is quite a bit for someone who's, never learned to cook. And if it didn't look like the picture, it went on the wall.
Yeah.
So sometimes when it doesn't look like the picture, Liam will chuck it, it goes on the wall. Personally, I try and like, happy little tree it. And if
Try
I
to salvage
can,
it.
and try and solve it. But if I can't, I get pissed.
Mm.
So once I made a necklace, it was a hemp necklace, and hemp by its very nature isn't very uniform, and it was supposed to be a very uniform necklace, and I was pissed at it. Dad saw how pissed I was, and he's like, I'll take it. And I'm like, this is a girl's necklace. Why do you want it? And he hung it up in his bedroom. He's like, this is mine now. I like it. I felt so much better, but at the same time, I was like, why would you want it? Just because he understands the putting so much effort into something. Like Dory and I always back and forth, and it's a 1.0, 2.0, 3.0. It's not until you get into like 2.5 before it starts getting pretty good for most things, usually, if it's your own idea anyway. And it's frustrating to get there sometimes. but I'm mostly happy little tree, happy little tree.
Yeah, I don't get as attached. I certainly don't, especially to my failures. I do not get attached to my failures, but I definitely have some stuff that I made and I'm like, okay, this is cool for like a one-off thing. And then it became like a workhorse of like, oh, I use this all the time. Where I was like, I didn't even think about it when I made it, but now I need more of this, like a lot more of this. Have you had that like that happen where you're like, oh, this is just a nothing sort of thing? Like maybe you made a template or a pattern or whatever, and you're like, you used it once, and you're like, okay, that's cool. But then you wind up using it like all the time.
When I originally decided I wanted to make this business, I was doing stuff for charity because I'm very charity oriented. Our whole family is, I think. We've volunteered for different
Except for
groups.
me. I'm not a charity kind
Well,
of guy.
you did do scouts that, and they had some charity elements too.
Right.
That
Like charity for me is the immediate people that I can see
yeah,
within reach.
for me and mom though, it's been a big thing anyway.
Mhm.
So I was making items, and I'm like, well, what can I make for people to buy when I can donate the money to charity? And at that time, it was like junior diabetes or cancer, which has always been a huge one, the cancer one, in my family due to history. So
Yeah.
I made these throw pillows for friends. Actually, it was for one of my best friends, Nikki. I made her throw pillows for her chair at work because it never has enough lumbar support, and they're kind of the perfect size to go right in your small back. And I just kind of randomly saw a Halloween themed one online. I went, oh, I can do that. And those have been the basis of my whole business is these throw pillows. And I never thought that making two for my best friend to take to work to advertise for me would somehow start me. I've made maybe 50 to 100 of those, and
Wow.
they're all handmade, and they're all gone almost. Like I might have 20 to sell on the website because everybody loves them. I have 5 in my house. You have, I think, 3 at your place. Mom's got,
I have two on my bed.
yeah, like everybody's got a couple at their house because everybody gets them for Christmas and birthdays because they're perfect. The
Just last
perfect
night,
size.
my cat was sitting on my one that I used to support my arm.
Yeah.
He was like, this is mine now. I sleep here. Go
It's
fuck your arm.
perfect size for cats too.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I did not expect. That's a pretty simple template. It's 2 pieces of fabric and a pillow that's cut in half that I have to sew down the side, which really isn't easy. But simplest thing in the world. 1 zipper, 2 pieces of fabric. Did not think, like I do complicated things. I'll sometimes add appliques that are all hand stitched and whether or whatever else. But that was the basis of my entire business. Did not expect that.
So, like, what would you say of the mediums that we have dabbled in? What would you think would be the most obscure one that you've done? Like one that people wouldn't really think about, like, as definitely like painting, drawing, video editing, even nowadays and stuff like that. That is a lot more mainstream. There's a lot of people that do those, but like, what would be one that you would say like people probably wouldn't think that you've touched?
Quilting, maybe.
Quilting is a big enough business to have their own stores,
Yeah,
though.
but only for old people. All the stuff that I do is basically old people. I sew, which is old people. I quilt, which is old people. I
Yeah.
crochet. Everything
But
seems to be
yeah,
old
quilting is a
people.
big deal for old people though. Like
Yeah, it's true.
that's not a small business. They do
Well, I
tours
think
of that
the
stuff.
the weirdest one is that then that I'd say the vinyl, because how many people think that people can even make their own wallets and purses and bags? That's something that you buy, not something that you make.
Right.
And I started out with one of my best friends, Nikki. Again, we were working together to make upholstery seating for play places, and car seats and upholstery seating and bags are all made with vinyl, basically the same thing, same type of vinyl too. You want the good stuff that's thick and rubs well and lasts long. It's all the same thing, and that never occurred to me, or really I don't think anybody else, because like Dory likes to say, people don't look at seams. People don't see how items are created, just the finished item.
Oh, that's yeah, that's very obvious if you work in any kind of distribution industry, right? When you're working distribution or deliveries, people don't understand just how much of a back end the front of a retail store has, right? Any retail store of any kind has an enormous chain supplying the shelves that, are either full or empty when you get to them. And people don't comprehend that ever. And it's the same thing with how things are made, right? There's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes that you just do not see unless you do it yourself, basically. And then once you do like do it yourself, you see it all the time, right? It's the same if you work stocking shelves or anything like that. You don't think about the fact that every single product, like legally, at least in Canada and in North America, has a UPC. In fact, I think in the world, but it's a universal product code. So if you're looking for an item and you want to see if the price on the shelf is for the item that's on the shelf, because oftentimes it's not, right? Maybe they've stickered it different or they put it in the wrong place. Literally every single item has a barcode that you can look at the numbers and mash them up.
Yeah, I know that, you know that, but we also read the ingredients list on things. I think creative people see things a little bit differently. Thank
Well, the
goodness.
reason I read ingredients is mostly health reasons.
Yeah, health reasons for both of us, but it makes us look at little details, even if we don't want to. Yeah, it's weird. What about you? What's the weirdest thing that people probably wouldn't know for a medium
It's
that you?
definitely one that you directed me to is chainmail. Every
Yeah.
time I think of like, what's the most obscure random
Yeah.
thing that I did for no reason, it was definitely chainmail.
I don't even remember teaching you to do it, but I'm not surprised I taught everybody. So
Yeah, and yeah, you did it way more than I did. You did it with aluminum rings, and you made like full shirts and like vests and stuff out of it. I did it with stainless steel, and it was like a much greater grip required to do it, but I also didn't do it nearly as much. I made like a wallet cover out of it. That was definitely one of the ones where it's like I made a product, I did it. I can definitely say I dabbled in that medium, and it was weird as fuck. I don't know why I did it.
because it was fun, something different.
It wasn't even that. It's like I would have really liked to be able to make myself. I want to be a blacksmith, right? It's
Who
like
doesn't want to be a blacksmith? You've been watching Forged in Fire. Everybody wants to be a blacksmith.
yeah, if you're into fantasy or just any kind of like medieval era stuff, it's a fantasy, right? For sure. And so I did it for a little bit, and I was like, okay, this has no practical application in real life. I'm not gonna actually do anything more with it.
That's the thing. Would you ever actually do that if it was an ability like a forging?
I would do it if there was a reason for it, right? So if let's say this was 100 or 150 years ago, I would absolutely have done it, right? And it probably would have made it my job. But since there is no practical applications for it, it's not something that I would really consider doing.
I'd probably be a seamstress, but generally most women were those days anyway.
Yeah.
Which brings me to one of my weird, obscure questions. Like I have what mediums did you originally start in when you, for us, it would probably be pretty young. Which mediums did you start with?
I think it would have to be because our mom ran a daycare for 12 years, and every day she had a craft that the kids would do. So it would definitely be related to arts and crafts, even before I like started with miniatures, because I didn't start that till I was 9, and she started the daycare when I was like 5. So it would probably be decorations, right? Like, because we most of the stuff that we made during that craft time, which was like a daily thing during the week, would be some sort of decorations that kids could bring home and the parents could put up in their house. And mom had every single month she had a different theme for her decorations for the daycare, so she would redecorate every month. It would like one month it would mostly be based around the holiday of that month, but if the month didn't have a holiday, it would be like dinosaurs or space or something like that the kids would be interested in. And then a lot of the crafts would be themed around whatever the theme was for that month. So that would probably be like my first creative endeavors, and like the creative medium would be arts and crafts, just
like recycled crafts mostly.
Yeah, decorations. Yeah.
Mine actually would surprise you because before we moved to that new house and mom started the daycare, I did ballet. So I wanted to dance. I watched Flashdance even before probably before you even did. And I literally did a flash dance to ballet. Is I wanted to dance hip hop at ballet. And I even brought flash dance music and danced with them. They didn't like that, so I didn't stay with it. But if I were, doing it nowadays, I was a young kid nowadays, there is such thing as hip hop dancing. There wasn't really, at least not in Vancouver when I was, in the 90s, a kid. There wasn't like that kind of thing.
That would have been very early 90s too.
Yeah. So my parents didn't think to put me in hip hop because there wasn't such a thing. And I probably would do hip hop now when I was a kid. That would have been my first thing, would be dancing.
Yeah.
I still love to dance. I don't know what to do with my arms anymore. Maybe I could have learned when I was younger, but I wanted to dance.
Yeah, it was, yeah, for me it would have been the decorations, I think.
And
I Yeah.
if you were not this age, but a kid nowadays that has
Okay.
access to all this stuff the kids do, because we didn't then in the 90s.
Right.
What do you think your creative mediums would have been?
Probably video game development.
Yeah,
Like
I
we're
was
saying
actually
like
thinking that too.
right now, right? It's like,
Yeah,
okay, all of a sudden now I'm like 6 years old or whatever.
yeah, you could do
Uh
your own app.
yeah, like kids are making video games with simple programs super early on like tablets, right? And I've always been interested in video games even when I was a super young kid. So having the tools be available to you, I'd probably be making something in Minecraft or something like that, right? Using it to make my own games. Because that's something that I do a lot with like the campaign and stuff like that is I'd make a lot of my own mini games and things like that. So if I was just like clean slate, go at it, I would probably be working on some sort of video game development because it would be something I could produce for myself and my friends that would have a purpose, right? So if I had the same mindset anyway, it would probably be, that's my guess, something to do with video game development.
I think I'd probably be winding up doing stuff, either dancing, like I said, or with movies, because I've always loved costuming and I've always loved like the storytelling aspect of movies. So like directing, not
Mhm.
playing. I'm not very good at it as an actress. I don't like pretending to be someone I'm not. I just like dressing up like them. So
But it's not
maybe,
like that wasn't available when we were younger too.
but
And we
no,
we kind of dabbled in that too, in
there
like
wasn't
making our own
like you
videos.
couldn't record stuff without it being attached to the TV. And we
Yeah,
did
there
it.
is that. There's super easy recording software nowadays.
Yeah. So actually, it's really cool. Every time I see something like a little camera with a printer connected to it, I'm like, oh, could you imagine like being two and being able to take pictures of whatever you want? Because it's like 2 cents for it to print out on this little heat transfer paper, and then you could color it. Like that'd be so cool, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Dory and I were like, yeah, we probably wind up like an art director, director of a movie, or like
Or at
costume.
least that would be what would get you into it. Because that's the thing is whatever
Yeah.
you got you into it doesn't necessarily mean what you wind up in, right? Especially if we're like, okay, we're children starting now. That means we're adults in like another 20 years or whatever. Right. And by that point, you probably have a completely different taste or interest.
Well, we would be completely different people, that's for sure. Now
Uh,
we're learning this kind of stuff in our 30s.
yeah.
I'm learning this kind of stuff in my 30s. I just bought Adobe one of the versions for amending videos. It's not like the professional one, it's like just underneath for the $150 instead of
Hmm.
paying every month. And it has like double exposure videos. And I'm like, that sounds so cool. Having had taken photography in 35 mil in college.
Yeah. You took photography
Yeah.
and you were like full on dark rooming it, right?
Yep, dark room with all of the chemicals and double exposure there. Now we've got videos we can double expose in 2 clicks. I'm like, oh, it's so cool.
Yeah, maybe that's what off the top of our head, why don't you give us a list, whether in order or not, what you can think of the mediums that you have dabbled in? As
um
I know it's a long one for both of us, even, and I've done less than you.
well, dance, obviously. Arts and crafts, recycled craft with mom. Beadwork, which I never stayed together. I'd like to revisit that one and can keep it together. Hemp jewelry making, friendship bracelets, and then we're into elementary school. So poetry recital, which I used to do in front of the entire school because I enjoyed doing it.
Yeah, I think you wrote a poem for one of the Remembrance Days at our elementary
I
school.
Yep, and I wrote a poem about spring, I believe it was. It was in a book that was produced by our district that mom bought just for my little poem. And then I still have some short stories that I wrote in elementary school that I got to write about aliens and sci-fi. And then in high school I did the art drama, found out I'm not so good at the drama part, so just went into the art where I did do some painting and some clay work.
You're more on the scenery production than you are on the acting side.
Yes, I found out I'm not a very good actress, but they didn't have a costuming. They didn't have like set painting and stuff. So I just did the art part, and then I found out like 3D art. So it was mostly we did cubism with wood. I did woodworking. We did clay. We did paper mache. We did paper craft in 3 dimensions. We did all kinds of stuff. In that time after high school, I did motion picture set painting at BCIT. That was really fun. I did photography as well as just regular art, picture playing, and like art history kind of. Then I got into the sewing as well as jewelry making and accessory making.
Ornaments as well.
What was that?
Ornaments as well.
Yeah, ornaments, but ornaments has never really stopped. I think we've always made decorations.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's been a permanent in the house decor. And then, yeah, I've been mostly sticking with the fabric type options, but I make all kinds of accessories as well. You remember those perler beads, so the iron-on beads that are basically like,
Yeah, I've got a
pixelated.
clock that you made out of those,
Yeah, so it's
as
like
well as like an Oogie Boogie magnet for my refrigerator over here.
yeah, so it's like a pixelated picture, and then you iron it and it all sticks together. And then I've done resin, and we even did
Chainmail. You did chainmail too.
chainmail, soapstone carving, which I didn't really do too much of yet. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's all I can think of at top of
yeah,
head.
so much. And then I like while you were listing yours, I was trying to think of mine. I'm like, I can think of maybe 3 before high school.
Recycled craft.
Yeah, arts and crafts because it was part of the
Yeah.
daycare, right? Writing because I was writing fan fiction as well as reading fan fiction. That's actually one of the first like writings that I ever did, was because I do a lot of like story creation that I don't write down at all. That was, as a kid, that's how I used to get myself to sleep, is I would just construct a story, and in the middle of constructing the story, eventually that would get me to sleep, and I still kind of do it today. And so I just add on those stories. Sometimes I drop it and then start a new one, or pick it up and add them together and stuff like that. I did a lot of that as a kid, and it was very rare for me to actually write any of that down because the writing could never cover all of the stuff that I'd created in my head before I go to sleep. So I had the crafts, the writing. I don't think I did anything in the way of like development on the computer. I've always been a consumer when it comes to like computer related projects, but I spent quite a bit of time on it because I was homeschooled for a while there. But even then, it was mostly just like I would consume media, either knowledge or whatever it might be. I read a lot and produced very little. Then at like 9, I started the miniature stuff, and that got me way more fired up in the creative endeavors throughout high school too. I don't deviate as much, nowhere near. Like I don't dabble anywhere near as much as you do when it comes to trying out new things. It's very much like if it's in service to my main thing, then I'll do it.
I remembered a couple more.
Yeah,
I do
yeah.
Sculpty. So Sculpty's like clay, oven baked clay. I remember that. And then I use my Cricut now, which is the Silhouette actual version. So that's paper crafting. I used to do scrapbooking. And then now we're doing vinyl crafting. So you can iron it onto t-shirts and stuff. I've done silk screen as well, and painting on textiles. And you can actually use those vinyl on mugs and stuff now too, and resin them as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, yeah, during high school, that would be the time where I probably had the most branching out of art styles that I wouldn't have generally done because I had art classes, right? So I would do stuff like painting. I did some pottery. I did 3D stuff. And yeah, once again, bounce off of drawing in my art classes. Though some of that stuff has stuck, the color theory especially is the thing that really stuck with me for art classes, as I kind of got that imprinted into my mind and kind of memorized it. And
Yeah,
I
you've done
definitely
an
apply
awesome
that
job
all the
with that.
time.
I have to ask Story about color theory all the time. I swear, because our uncles are colorblind, I can't I can't, honestly. The coloring makes no sense to me. So I'm just like, do these make sense or not? I don't have that. So there you go. You're one up on me there.
Well, yeah, to me, I just make it a logical problem, right? Where it's like I understand the color wheel, right? And it's just like, okay, so I know like how this generally should work, and I just kind of use that, and like I might experiment with it a little bit, but mostly I just apply it logically as I can. I just make it a math problem. What would be a medium that you would want to do like in the future if money was no issue, right? You could just do whatever you want and you wouldn't have to worry about paying for it.
I like the idea of jewelry smithing, like gemstones,
Okay.
silversmithing.
Yeah, we've known a few people that were
Yeah,
jewelers.
I'd love to do that. I have an obsession with gemstones, so I'd love to do that. That'd be cool. It's an expensive hobby, one that I really wouldn't want to do with lots of money behind it.
Right.
But maybe I'll buy it off a friend if she's done.
For me, and it's one that I like, I could definitely see myself eventually investing in. I'd probably be 3D printing, just because with the amount of miniatures that I make and like work with, having a 3D printer that I could like get patterns for or make patterns myself and print off objects, it would probably be a big benefit to my miniature collection to be able to have like a robust 3D printer, but I just am not willing to pay that much money.
Yeah, they're kind of expensive. It really depends on which one you want. If you really want to discuss that, you can ask Tila. She's got two.
Mhm.
I don't know if there's special things you have to look into for this, the smallness, like how tiny in the scale your miniatures are. But
Yeah.
she's pretty damn happy with her, and so are we. She loves hers, both of them.
Yeah, they're like when they first started coming out on the market, I was like, that is something that will revolutionize my hobby when it becomes affordable.
Yeah, I
Right.
think
And it's getting to the point now where it almost is debatably affordable, but it's still not quite there yet. When it first came out, they were like $10,000, right?
yeah,
So
they're
I
not
was
like
like,
that anymore. So what are we talking about next week?
well, we've got a few ideas. So that's something that we'll have to decide. I figured we could probably get into specifics of past projects. That was my idea. We could each bring a project that we have actually fully completed, and we could go over it and sort of show our work, talk about how we went through the whole process of like the concept of it, starting it, what difficulties we had as we were going through it, and then like get a bit of the final product. Something that we are not, it's not in progress, it is done, however long it's been done that we have it. So that was my idea for next week. We could talk about some of our past projects.
I do have an idea or two kind of similar projects for that one. So for sure, I have some things I've finished.
Yeah. I have full armies that I am very proud of, that I can like, I have some in progress photos for one of them anyway. I'm not big on the in progress photos. So that was my idea. There's some other things that we might talk about, so I'm not gonna fully commit to that, but that's probably what we'll be talking about next week.
Okay.
What are you going to be trying to accomplish for next week? Is it going to be more of the video and like audio editing stuff? Are you going to be working on the website?
Yeah, for sure. I'm going to be doing that. I'm hoping to post this up on the website, at least in the creative questions blog section. If not, because I'm doing it with another person, so I'm not gonna purposely rush them as well as having to write that novella. I'll post that in this particular description of the video. So if you click that, then you can see any of the stuff I've been currently working on, including the website that just says under construction. And then I will definitely leave a link for Liam's blog. And are you going to update it too with some of the photos you talked about today?
Yeah, I'm pretty lazy when it comes to working on the website, but it is easy. So if I actually decide to do it, it doesn't take much time for me to do it.
Okay, but for sure we'll at least I'll post his website link as well, and you can take a look. But for sure, all of our social media stuff is on there. Everything is under New Nerd Novelties. I'm on Facebook and on Instagram as New Nerd Novelties. I'm on Twitter as Des Silver, as well as I'm on Facebook as Desiree Silver. And my website is www.newnerdnovelties.com. So I'll definitely post those links for you.
Yeah, and for me, it's soloquest.ca is where you can find all the pictures of my miniatures for the campaign that I've uploaded anyway. maps that I've made for the campaign, as well as like the lore and background of the setting that I've made for Arvindon, which is the name of my campaign setting. So yeah, if you want to go soloquests.ca, that'll give you a bunch of galleries, not everything that I've ever done, but there's a decent amount of good looking pictures in there. So that's where you can find me, and that's also where I'll be posting the blog of the pictures of the stuff I've been working on, as well as the podcast.
And I just wanted to say thanks for everybody for listening. So I'm Desiree Silver. We're the brother sister pair bringing you creative questions.
Liam Hewlett. See you again next week.
Have a great day.